I wanted to talk about the Hillary Clinton, Bernie Sanders, Democratic Party situation. I was thinking of saying mess, but that's a little too strong. And I was thinking of saying debate, and that's not quite right, because it really is a situation. And the device that I wanted to, the lens that I want to see this through for just a moment, and follow along with me on this. There's a little bit of stuff to this, right? But is Gary Gensler. Gary Gensler is a genius. He's a very, very, very smart man. Gary Gensler, in 1979, joined Goldman Sachs in their mergers and acquisitions department. So he's a big fan of mergers and acquisitions. 79, M&A was just barely getting started. It was really 1982 when Reagan essentially stopped enforcing the Sherman Act that M&A became, a huge profitable business for the banksters. And Gensler found himself in the middle of this explosion. And in fact, in 1984, 3 years into the Reagan administration, he assumed responsibility. This is from a press release, a White House press release in 1998, when he was appointed Undersecretary for Domestic Finance of the Department of the Treasury. In other words, this was written by Bill Clinton's team. In 1984, he assumed responsibility for Goldman Sachs' efforts in advising media companies. So he's an expert at manipulating the media. And he was elected a partner in Goldman Sachs in 1988, which is pretty astonishing. I mean, he's a very, very young man. And so who is this Gensler and what has he done? Well, first of all, when he was in the Clinton administration, Undersecretary of the Treasury for Domestic Finance, he helped Phil Gramm write this thing called the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. Phil Gramm introduced it into Congress in 99, and it failed. And so as we were coming up after the elections, so we're coming up on the Thanksgiving Christmas holiday season, on the Christmas holiday season. There's a must-pass piece of legislation, the omnibus bill, the spending bill. And this is the last year that Bill Clinton is president. George W. Bush, well, I think at this point in time, actually, I think the election was being disputed before the courts. But Bill Clinton was no longer going to be president. This bill passes Congress, the omnibus spending bill. It's the entire next year's budget, because it has to pass Congress. If it doesn't, the government shuts down. Only 4 people out of 535, out of 435 members of the House of Representatives, out of 100 senators, only 4 people voted against it: Rand Paul and 3 other folks in the House of Representatives. That was it, because it was the budget. And people didn't actually realize at the time that Gensler, working in the Clinton administration, this is Bill Clinton as president, that Gensler, his number 2 guy in Treasury, had helped Phil Gramm slip this thing into the budget bill. It passes, and immediately Senator Bernie Sanders figures out that we've been snookered, right? I mean, it was a few weeks later, but, Bernie Sanders, he's got a long memory. He says, no, wait a minute. So 8 years later, Barack Obama wants to put Gensler in his administration and to head the Commodity Futures Trading Commission. And Bernie Sanders puts a hold on the nomination and goes to the floor of the Senate and says, and I quote, Mr. Gensler worked with Senator Phil Gramm and former U.S. Reserve Chairman Alan Greenspan to exempt credit default swaps from regulation, which led to the collapse of AIG and has resulted in the largest taxpayer bailout in history. Okay? So Bernie tried to block his even being appointed to the Treasury Department. Gary Gensler. Which brings us to today. Where is Gary Gensler now? Gary Gensler is the chief financial officer. He's the senior economic advisor to Hillary Clinton's campaign. Keep in mind, this is the guy who helped write and insert the Commodity Futures Modernization Act into the omnibus bill, which, yes, Bernie voted for. Everybody in Congress voted for, because to vote against it was to vote to shut down the government. The bill had a lot of crap in it, right? So anyhow, he is now the top advisor to Hillary Clinton's campaign. And quoting from Robert Scheer's piece over in Truthdig and Huffington Post, Gary Gensler, Hillary has been prepped by her debate advisor, Gensler. Now, what did Gensler advise her to do? He advised her, according to Robert Scheer, to attack Bernie Sanders for voting for that omnibus bill, that annual budget legislation, which had slipped into it, unknown to Sanders, had slipped into it, the Commodity Futures Modernization Act. And here is what Hillary Clinton had to say during the debate last Sunday night about a piece of legislation that her campaign committee's chief financial officer inserted into legislation that her husband signed. When she was not in the Senate, and Martin O'Malley has never been in the Senate, so neither one of them would have voted for, an annual appropriations legislation. Just listen to this. Now, knowing this background, that it was Gensler who set this law up that deregulated, Wall Street on commodities, that it was Gensler who then who had been 18 years at Goldman Sachs, was a full partner, was the richest guy in the entire Obama administration, and the net worth of around $50-60 million. And he advised Hillary to say this.
Senator Sanders, you're the only one on this stage that voted to deregulate the financial market in 2000, to take the cops off the street, to use Governor O'Malley's phrase, to make the SEC and the Commodities Futures Trading Commission no longer able to regulate swaps and derivatives, which were one of the main cause of the collapse in 2008.
Now, I remember Sunday night watching the debate and hearing her say that and going, what? I mean, Bernie's been on this show every Friday for over a decade. I know his positions on these issues, and I know he would never vote for that. And I thought, if she's saying it, it can't be a lie. I mean, Hillary Clinton wouldn't lie on national television. And no, technically it's not a lie. He voted for the omnibus annual budget appropriation, and that had been slipped into it, whether he knew it or not. Yeah. But it was her advisor who put it there. And it was her husband who signed it. And it was her who hired this guy who wrote this legislation that she just attacked Bernie for. So what the hell is going on here? I would like to ask Clinton supporters, what is it you're supporting? What is it that you support? Hillary Clinton opposes single-payer health care. She opposes reinstating Glass-Steagall. She opposes a $15 minimum wage. She is in favor of the death penalty. She wants to send special forces into Syria and have a no-fly zone. She thinks the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement against Israel is wrong. She opposes marijuana legalization. She opposes free tuition at universities. She supports the Clinton-Gingrich welfare reform. She supports hydraulic fracturing.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
She supports the Patriot Act and thinks Snowden is a criminal. She wants to make flag burning a felony. What are you voting for? What are you supporting? To watch more clips from our programs, hit the Watch More Videos button over here. And please be sure to hit the handy-dandy subscribe button so you'll always be up to date. Tag, you're it.